welcome to our viewers today. This is episode number 34. We're going to continue with Deacon, and we're going to have Louis Bernard, who's going to sit in and discuss with him something that the parishioners have been asking, and we think that the Deacon is really in a position to answer that. He's very well traveled throughout the world, and we'd just like to get his opinion of this. So with that, I'll turn it over to Louis.
So, Deacon, thank you. I have several priest friends and several parishioners have asked me, they feel disheartened about the state of the church. Some see, the gospel being preached in a political fashion, pedophilia in the priesthood, those kinds of things. How do you see the state of the church right now?
Well, the first thing is that people should stop worrying. I mean, we've been here before. We're going to be here again in the history of the church. And Jesus was very clear, the gates of hell shall not prevail against it.
Correct.
So, so we're in one of those dips that happens in the life of the church. So we should be confident and joyful. And here's why I say that. The parallel that I see happening in the church now is the same thing that happened during the Babylonian exile with King Nebuchadnezzar. So if you look in the book of Daniel, the first 3 chapters of the book of Daniel, what happens? Nebuchadnezzar comes and he overruns the people of Israel, right?
Right.
So wait a minute. Israel was God's chosen people. Why would God allow that to happen? Well, what was happening? The people were supposed to be the witnesses of God's love to all the pagan cultures around them. But what happened instead? They started adapting to the ways of the pagans. They started thinking and acting like the pagans. So they were rejecting God and accepting the pagans. So God says, well, if you want to act like the pagans, I'm going to let the pagans rule you. And so He allowed Nebuchadnezzar to come in. Look what's happening to us today. So many Catholics, instead of standing up for our faith in the witness of the culture, we're capitulating to the faith. We're caving into the faith. We're caving into a culture of woke and critical race theory and liberation theology and Black Lives Matter and all this other stuff that moves us away from a deep, intimate relationship with the Lord. And so, like for example, we talk about 79% of Catholics didn't believe that Jesus was present in the Eucharist before the pandemic, and then we have the pandemic where you stop going to church. You can go to a bar, casino, but you can't go to church.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I have friends that do that.
Yeah, I mean that's ridiculous. And so, and then when we can go back to church, people stop coming to church because they'd always grown up thinking, well, you have to go to church. And, oh wait, we don't have to go to church. So now they're saying, well, why do we have to go? I mean, it's just been a mess. Never mind the internal confusion in the church. We're living in a time where the church needs to speak with boldness, with clarity, with precision, and we're not getting that.
And I find
we're getting confusing messages. We're getting confusing statements about blessing people in irregular relationships, which is ridiculous. We're talking about taking away regular free access to the extraordinary form of the Mass, which, if that's not your jam, fine, but still allow a robust use of that form of the Mass, because that really fed a lot of people. For me, I saw a lot of people, young families, attending the extraordinary form. So in my mind and heart, there was no reason to rescind it, but we have what we have. Very confusing teachings. We get some very clear teachings on some things, but very confusing teachings on other things. Just a very strange place to be. But through, and you talk about politics, we have politicians who are pro-abortion, who are pro-redefinition of marriage,
Catholic politicians,
pro-transgender, and things like that. And then we hear nothing about them. But then when we are looking toward changing certain immigration policies, then we hear from the Vatican all of a sudden. I mean, I was just like, wait, where was all this attention for the other politicians who were talking about these other things? I mean, so you can get caught up in all of that. Like, one thing I would encourage Catholics to do is stop watching politics and stop listening, because that's garbage. And the thing is, I find with Catholics that listen to that stuff, they're angry all the time because they're so caught up in politics. What happened? That's why I don't watch television. I don't listen to any of that. We got to stay focused on what God has called us to do. You know, we got to stay focused on what we can do within our sphere of influence. So I think during this time, this is a time of pruning. This is a time, you know, sometimes the weeds get in there. You have to prune back and take out the weeds. And so the church is shrinking. You know, I've been to many dioceses around the country where they're merging parishes, where, you know, 3 parishes are becoming 1 parish now. You know, so there's a lot of that going on. There's a shrinking of the church. People have left during the pandemic. There's a shrinking. So sometimes you have to shrink and really get down to that core so we can start to grow again. That happened in the early church. You know, the church was you know, they were trying to kill all the Christians, and then it started to sprout and explode. I think that's where the process of that shrinking, and then we get down to that bottom point, we're going to start to explode and grow again.
Well, I seem to notice in the world there's a movement, particularly Christian music. It's just booming. It's like a new field of music. And I think the Holy Spirit is involved in that movement, encouraging these young people to come back. I don't see it as much in Catholicism, but the Christian churches. Do you see any of that?
Well, yeah, I think in a lot of young people's hearts there's a desire for beauty, you know, because beauty is one of the transcendentals, right? Goodness, truth, and beauty. And those are reflections of God's own life in the world, truth, goodness, and beauty. And so there's a lack of all 3 in our culture because we live in a culture that's self-aggrandized, that's turned in on itself. You know, so you worship the God of me, myself, and I. You know, that's the Trinity that the culture worships. And so young people, in their heart of hearts, they're recognizing that, there's something missing here. You know, and so they're looking for truth. I hear from young people all the time, we want to hear the truth and we're not hearing it. All the time, constantly from young people. Bishop Barron, the way he puts it is, the young people are asking questions, we're not giving them answers. You know, so that's one piece. The other thing is beauty. You know, they're surrounded with pornography and there's all these things that the culture says is something that's beautiful and that's good. In their hearts, they know that that's not good. And so they're looking for beauty. And one of the ways that attracts young people to beauty is music. And so when you have music that elevates the mind and the heart to God, I think for young people that's something that's very attractive. I mean, even the Catholic Church, you know, we saw the growth of like Gregorian chant. You know, remember when that chant album a few years back was the #1 album in the world. Like Benedict the monk singing chant is the #1 album in the world. That's nuts. But again, that spoke to the human heart seeking out things that are beautiful. And so we see a resurgence of young people going to masses where the music is elevated, where the worship is elevated, where there's beautiful vestments and there's beautiful stained glass windows and statues. I mean, it just draws your mind and your heart and elevates you to God, you know. And I think that's something that's attracting young people, which is good. But now they need to know why. So I think it's a good, like fishing, right? It's a good lure to bring them in. But now they have to understand why they're there. So I think the music is great, but it also needs to be a vehicle for deeper evangelization.
Yeah. Well, that's all I've got, and I really appreciate you taking time to do that.
Most welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.